When you're doing good, doors of opportunity open. And also, distractions come along too. And that's me around our discussion today. It's understanding, okay, how do I go ahead and navigate those opportunities when they come up? Welcome to another earlier conversation. I am Tony Jalen, joined by the incredible, incomparable.
Danielle Jalen.
That's the- in our earlier conversation today, we're going to be talking about this thought here because, like I said at the beginning, it's when you're doing good and you're doing well, doors of opportunity will open up for you. I think sometimes what happens when those opportunities open up, we tell ourselves different stories to sometimes keep us from doing it. And I think the question you got to ask yourself, it's that it's not about what you're capable of doing. It's about what you are willing to do. When you think about that question, think about all the things that you want to achieve and go after in your life. How does that help you in terms of deciding what to go after and not go after?
Well, I think it just puts a bigger target on your effort that you're putting into um, what it is that you truly want versus what maybe somebody else wants for you. Um, I think you truly want something, you will figure out a way to put the efforts in to do it, what you're willing to do. Versus what you're capable of doing because you may not have the necessary capabilities at this time to make it happen. But yet, if you're willing to do the work, those will develop.
And you said two things. Number one, is it something that you want to do or is it something someone else is wanting you to do? And two, okay, yeah, hey, I want to go ahead and, be 185 pounds, 5%. Like, I am capable of doing that. The question is, am I willing to do the work that's required to do it? Like, everyone has all these grandiose goals and dreams that they want to achieve, which is great, which you should have goals and dreams that you want to achieve. But are you willing to do what's required to do it? But let's go back to what you said moments ago, because I think that's a dichotomy in itself. I mean, or maybe a conundrum, maybe it's the word for it. It's like doing what you want to do versus what others want you to do. Can you expound a little bit more on that thought?
Well, I think sometimes there's goals, like obviously, if you're working at somewhere, you may have goals that your employer wants you to have. Um, and sometimes those are more difficult to work towards because it's being demanded of you or required of you versus you actually wanting to do them. So I think when you can find what's in goals that others have set for you to make it your own, you will find a way to make those happen.
So figuring out, like, okay, in other words, you don't have to love what you do, but you have to find the love in what you do.
Yeah.
How have you learned how to do that?
Well, the stressful demands that you and Ezekiel have on me. No, I think it's just shifting it. Like, I can make it something dreadful, or I can find something in it that helps me as a person grow and develop. I saw somebody post something in regards to I have to think how it was said. I'll have to come back to it. But like, if it's something like within my control that I can actually like work on and work towards, then it's not as daunting of a task to complete it.
But what about when it's something that's required of you to do? Like, like, for example, you have a professional career. There's certain things that it's called keep your job, right? It's required you to do. You may not quote unquote want to do it. Like, how do you navigate that discussion in your brain?
Well, again, like if you want to keep your job, then it's something you want. So you will figure out a way
That's true.
to get it done.
Right. I still have this quote next to me from years ago. It's going to keep on happening to you until you figure it out. And I think sometimes, if I look back at the things that I've achieved, whether it be personal or professional, if someone would have told me that all the things I would do to do it, I would have to do that I did, I don't know if I would have went after some of those things. So I think sometimes we got to realize, hey, you know what? If you want to rise up, if you want to get to that next level, you may not know what it is going to be required of you. However, though, it is going to be required more of what you are right now. And it's not going to be always convenient either. It's going to be, I think, a disruptor of what you're currently doing because it's something different. You know, I think this upcoming fall for us, like we've got Ezekiel graduating high school or last year of high school volleyball and graduating. He's a senior. I've got speaking I'm doing. I've got work I'm doing. And I also coach high school as well. And I think we just had this discussion of there was going to be times that I was going to possibly have to miss some of our girls' events that I'm coaching. But yet we realized, you know what, that came with accepting this role, even though we also said on the other end of it, hey, there was a mutual understanding that Ezekiel was our first priority. That we'd have to figure out as a team to go ahead and get others in there to help. And I think that comes back to the question of not so much what you're capable of doing is what are you willing to do. Actually, I was on a discussion this morning. This is now what 5 years ago now. And I had developed a friendship with Mel Robbins. If you guys don't know who Mel Robbins is, she wrote the book, The 5-Second Rule. And she was traveling all over the US and the world to speak. And I remember she was in Fargo, North Dakota, of all things. And her and I are messaging on Instagram. And she goes, Tony, I can help you. I can help you get into the speaking circuit. I know people. I'm willing to help you. And I was like, oh, this is great. Because my back of my mind was, I've always wanted to speak more. I wanted to get out there. And I had that moment when she was in Fargo. And I was like, knowing what I knew about what her schedule looked like, was I willing to start doing that? And I may have gotten the horse before the cart because you have to get the speaking gigs in order to fly around, right? And of course, she was Mel Robbins, so she was getting paid to speak all over the world by different companies and organizations. And I remember at that moment, I was sitting down. I don't know if it was in my office here, office at work. And I'm like, Ezekiel's got just a handful of years left of school and being at home. I'm not willing to do that much travel as of yet. Now, I'm sure Daniil's thinking, okay, after Ezekiel graduates, we can do that all day long, right? But I think that's just a question for people to ask themselves more often. Like, okay, you want to achieve this goal, but do you realize it's going to require more of you? So it requires more of you. Like, then when you recognize it does, what's the next steps then?
Well, you have to ask yourself, like, are you really willing to commit to it? And if not, is it that important to you? I think sometimes we have these great ideas of things that we want to do. They sound great and they look great when you write them down. And then you start making the steps out of like, what is it going to take to achieve that? And am I willing to put that effort in? Does my time allow me to put that effort in with everything else that is going on? And I think you just need to decide, like, is something going to have to sacrifice short term for it to happen? And are you willing to give up the things that you're sacrificing for to make those things happen?
Yeah. And I think too is to remember that, when you're deciding to go after something and ask yourself the question, not if you're capable of doing it. I mean, I think that's part of it, but are you willing to do it? If you're going to add something, you're going to have to take out something. And I remember years ago when Ezekiel was in ninth grade and we played baseball for 10 years. It felt like 10 years at least. And that decision to say, okay, do you really want to pursue the sport of volleyball? If you do, we're going to have to give up baseball. And that I remember that. I mean, just still thinking about it gets me a little bit because I enjoyed it so much. I know he did too. But that's when you got to make those tough decisions because now we look at, hey, I'm in his draft room. I call it the draft room now, the draft board, where because Ezekiel made that tough decision of saying, I'm going to commit to my academics. I'm going to commit to my volleyball and continue to improve on it. And I think too, I'll pause there. But because he committed to that, we got a draft board of different colleges. He's not only looking to go through academically, but also athletically as well. At the time, that choice seemed a lot more uncomfortable. But now I'm looking at, all right, I was talking to some other of my colleagues yesterday, and they're like, you got to be very proud of him. I'm like, oh, absolutely. I mean, it takes a lot of effort and work. And, we talk often that the work's not done yet. Now you're going to go to another level. It's going to require even more of you. And we've talked about that to him too. It's like, okay, it's going to require more of you to, do it. Like you cannot just get there with your talent alone. And he understands that. So what are some other things to consider once you said, okay, I'm willing to do that. I know I'm going to take some short-term sacrifices in order to achieve that. What are maybe some other things to consider?
Closing the back door, 100% committing, not giving yourself a foot in, foot out to make it happen. Because if you do have a foot in, a foot out, then there was no reason to make the choice to do it because you already sabotaged yourself, giving yourself an out if you don't succeed or if you don't put in the effort or if you don't commit to it 100%. Like, I think that is a big step to understand. Like, now you fully need to immerse yourself in that to make it happen.
That's true. You got to be in it to win it, so to speak. I think oftentimes too, it's easy to go ahead and have one foot on first base, another foot on second base. I think, at least in my experience, when I've done that, is when I don't succeed. Because I stand in this hesitation mode at times, like, oh, maybe no, oh, maybe so. Oh, I knew it wasn't going to work out anyways. I don't know if I really ever said that, but I think that's a good point. Was not 100% commitment, 98% commitment. It's either you're all in or you're in the way. So I think that's another good point. I think the other part is surrounding yourself with the right people. Because I think it's easier to bow out when you don't have other people you got to be accountable to. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, a lot of times the decisions that I make for you and Ezekiel is because I'm accountable to you. And if I'm not doing it or to help you in that sense, then I think like I wouldn't be doing it, because it's easy to like hide from yourself, but it's like harder to hide from others when you've made that commitment to them. So then you fall into a whole nother category of avoidance and blah, blah, blah. But I think when you have the chance to, and people that want to support you and are surrounding you, that I think it's important to do what you can to stay accountable to that.
Yeah. That's true. And you're right, because also you involve other people and then like, oh, you start shying away from them, you come avoidable. And I think that just sucks. Like, that's a bad place to be, in my esteemed opinion. because you're running from it then. It's like, oh, and I think a lot of times what happens when we start avoiding people is because, things aren't working out how you experience them to work out. Well, here's the truth of the matter. It's not going to. It's not going to be this straight line of, oh, peachy keen, everything's perfect. Yay. No. It's going to have its valleys. It's going to have its, highs and lows. But that's the reason why you have those accountability people surrounding you, because I think they will truly help you through. So, as we finish up, we talk about, okay, there's something you want to achieve, something you want to go after. Not only ask yourself if you're capable of doing it, but also ask yourself, are you willing to do what's required to achieve it? And you may not know what that path may be, but it's going to require more. In order to go up, it's going to require more. Like, I'm going to climb Mount Everest. It's going to take a lot more work than climbing a hill in North Dakota. And recognize that. I think the second thing you talked about is understand that there's going to be a sacrifice involved. That there may be a short-term sacrifice for long-term gain. And I think the third is, having an accountability partner. And you're not going to like it when they ask you about it. You might actually give them a little bit of attitude sometimes, but in your heart of hearts, that they're asking you for a good reason. Is there any other final thoughts you would say, Danielle, in terms of it all?
Well, I think just, put your 100% effort into it. And I think a lot of times doing the things that you need to do to get the things that you want aren't as taxing as the energy waste on procrastinating and putting it off or thinking about what you have to do wears you out more than the actual doing the stuff that it takes. And I think that you actually will end up getting there faster because you're doing the things that it takes instead of wasting the time pondering, like, should I do this or shouldn't I do that? Like, oh, this is going to take a lot of effort. Just if you're willing to do the work, then do the work and go after what you have set out for yourself.
That's very well said. Did I write that down yesterday? Because, I literally was thinking about something like this yesterday while working out. Because the amount of time you're wasting making the excuses, you would have got a lot further along by just doing it. And I'll leave you all with this quote here today. But before I do, if you did find benefits into this, make sure to share this. We are on Twitter, we are on YouTube, and we're also in the private Rare Leaders Facebook group. So you can make a private request to join us there for more resources and more of these audios. But at the end of the day, the difference between who you are and who you want to be is what you do. Think about that. Until next time, I'm Tony Jalen with
Danielle Jalen.
Go out today, be a rare leader, rise up. Onward and upward.